Hello, I am Jamster, and this is Rambling with Jamster, a terrible name, number 4. um, it's been a little, I sort of, made a promise last one, and somewhat fell flat. I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, so it's not as bad as normal. It's just, I don't know, like, when you want to do something, and then, like, in my case, my mid-semester break came up, and despite having the most free time I'll have for the next couple of weeks, I actually just sort of lazed around for like 7 days, which is just crazy, honestly. I really don't know why I didn't do anything. Like, I thought about recording things. I did try a few things. A couple games I tried playing, they're actually really hard to record. Surprisingly, out of all the games, I rarely encounter problems nowadays. And like, I'm suddenly just, all the things I try to play have problems. So it's been kind of interesting. Hopefully I can sort them out, because they are games I do want to play and I want to share my experience with you guys. So yeah. Moving on from that, because I feel like that's how most of these have been going, and I don't really want to just talk about that. So one of the things I've done recently, somewhat interesting, I guess, I bought, or pre-ordered, I don't know how to phrase this one because it's a bit weird. I bought the Nindoroid Tracer. Now hopefully that's appearing on the screen here somewhere. I figure that's probably a decent spot. I don't know. Never done editing on these ones, so I may have just pointed at a place, which didn't really help much, but it should appear on the screen. They're like little collectible figures, I guess. They're kind of like the pop culture ones, except, in my opinion, better. Just based off of ones I've seen, and it's not just the ones that I've seen, it's like they actually look more like the character. Whereas I find the pop culture ones, some of them, they nail it. Like, they look fantastic. But they're just very, they're stale. Like, they sort of just sit there and they do nothing. Whereas with these Nendoroid things, if you get more of them, you can somewhat set up dioramas and things like that, which I personally like. When I have something I collect, I like to have it more in some sort of action scene. I've got a sort of collection of Mega Bloks Halo stuff, like the Halo Wars series that they do. And I love having the sort of that freeze frame of a battle in the Halo thing. So I'd like that sort of with the like the Overwatch ones. Yeah. They have a couple others, actually, that you can currently get. Well, you can't get Tracer right now through the manufacturer. You can get it, though, possibly still through the Blizzard one if you're interested. But it is like they like have limited times to buy them. And it's kind of weird. It makes sense business wise. Like, you can sort of cycle out characters and then cycle in new ones, and they do it quite frequently. Like, every month there's at least 4 characters or 5 characters. I don't even know how many, really, because there's a lot of anime ones which I have no idea about. But they cycle them in, and they, after, and you get, say, maybe 2 months to order one, and then, they manufacture at some point in the future, and then they send it to you. And it's a bit strange, so I don't really like the fact that they're not made, and they can't just instantly ship it, but it's just the way it works, I guess. It is based from Japan, and I guess the Japanese people who sort of funded the initial business were fine with it, and so that's sort of how they've stuck with it. I do find it a bit weird, though. It's sort of like, for instance, the Tracer one. I won't get it, I think, until August or September. That's when they finish, when it should be shipping, roughly. Like, it may not even ship until like October, November, who knows. So I like, it's a long time when you think about it for just one collectible, and That's why it was one of those things I debated it, because I was just like, I don't really want to wait that long for a single item. But nonetheless, got it. There is the May one right now that you can get still for sure. I think unless it's sold out, because they've got a limited time you can buy it, but there's also a limited quantity as well. So I don't know how many they have, but you can only buy maybe say there's 10,000. If 10,000 people order, then that's it. You can't get one. But usually, I think the idea is if it's really popular, they'll rerun it in the future. So, if you missed out, there's a good chance, especially with the Overwatch ones, you'll probably see them come back. Perhaps in different skins though, so it might not be the exact same. I don't know. But then apparently the next one after May is going to be Mercy, which I'm definitely getting that one for sure. There's no thought about that one. Like, Mercy is probably my favorite character from Overwatch. Probably my most played character at this point, or second most. I think I play more Lucio just because generally Lucio is needed a lot more than Mercy. And also it's pretty fun to play Lucio nowadays, especially with his rework. So yeah, I mean, I think a Lucio or Mercy I would instantly get. I'm curious about how they'll do some of the bigger characters, because right now they're handling just the sort of people ones. But then characters like Roadhog or Reinhardt, they're generally bigger. Even Diva, for instance, they're all, I guess, bigger in general. Orisa would be an interesting one. But I'd like to see them all, like, the concept art for them. I reckon they're probably doing it, because I think Tracer probably sold pretty well. It definitely is a cool thing, though. They look cool. So hopefully there's been, like, things scrolling around there. Yeah. So something I guess I will talk about is, obviously this video is edited. The editing style and format, I don't know what it's going to be like at this point in time, like as recording. So hopefully it looks good. I think it's going to be a bit jump cut. In fact, it may even end up in a different order to the way I actually recorded it, because for instance this part I've said after the Nendoroid thing, but it makes more sense at the start. I don't know, or maybe even at the end. I might not change the order now that I've said it, because it would just be, anyway. But I would like some feedback if anyone would be willing to sort of give some nice feedback. I'm all like criticisms, whatever, if you think that there's something about it it makes it really hard to watch, or you don't like that it's got cuts in it, because obviously all the past ones, they've all been pretty straight through. Just a solid, like, me talking for 20 minutes, sometimes longer. So we'll have to see. So some games that hopefully we'll see, I guess. I said I wouldn't talk about this, but some games that we will see, and hopefully is oh, okay. So you've probably heard that, which is bugging me. It looked like two identical coins. One was bigger than the other, which is weird. It was a weird perspective thing. Anyway, so yeah, I know that I was talking about I said I wouldn't talk about this, but might as well. Hopefully on the horizon we'll see ukulele, some Minecraft probably, and something else probably, some other stuff. I would like to play some Lego Rock Raiders, because that's a pretty cool game. I really want to find a more like base building orientated RTS where there's the real-time strategy element to it, but there's like a real technical side to base building. I feel like that'd be a really interesting and very fun game. Like where you gotta set up like manufacturing lines to turn, like, in a way kind of like Minecraft, but turning, say, like iron into steel or something, and then producing your weapons through that. Like a really like you got to set up everything like in the factory lines, conveyor belts. I think that'd be a fantastic game. Like it would be slow paced, obviously, but it would be so interesting because part of it's like this big automation thing, and then another part would be, how do you defend yourself from potential attackers who just want to loot you for your resources, and there could be so many like little elements like you try and take a more like dictator sort of approach where anyone who you capture as a prisoner, you do something with them. Like you could do all sorts of crazy things. Like I think you could make a very intricate real-time strategy game that has a lot of like technicalities, but it's also a base builder, I guess. I think that'd be pretty cool, like set in the future, and obviously it wouldn't be realistic because realistic things don't necessarily make fun things. So, but I mean, if I was ever to make a game, I think I'd make that just a real-time strategy game that has a lot of focus on building up a good production line, kind of like Factorio in a way. And I guess in a way, Factorio is kind of what I'm thinking of, but instead of it just being you in this sort of vast world, it'd be more of a you set up your sort of facilities and get it all running, and people might come as settlers, kind of like in the Fallout 4 stuff. And then at the same time, there's going to be raiders and other events that could go wrong. And I guess the objective would it would be like a bit like Hearts of Iron or some of those sort of big scaled games where like, you've got your big world to conquer. So it'd be also like that. So you set up your civilization with its good production lines and stuff like that. And then, people are coming along, you got raiders, which are gonna, I guess, kind of like Civ 5's barbarians, or Civ 6, I think, has them as well. I think all the civilizations actually have barbarians. So, like, you'd have something like that. I think it'd be really interesting. With maybe some sort of end goal to conquer the world. And it would be kind of weird, because, see, you kind of go from, like, a localized sort of scale, and then to a much more global, like it goes from, say, just one area to like a country-sized area to suddenly continent-sized to global. So you wouldn't want it to be, it'd be weird how it sort of levels up or how it progresses, because, in one hand, you could still leave it as all these easy to micromanage somewhat areas, or you could, as you sort of get bigger, perhaps delegate people, like governors or scientists or something to sort of manage those things for you. So if you set up, like, let's say, a city, they'll set up the, resource mines and stuff like that. So then they'll do it automatically, and then if you really want to, you can take micromanagement control over it. That'd be my kind of game. I'd love it if I could make a game like that. It'd be so hard though. Like, you're talking about simulating like literally a planet. Potentially, if you really wanted to, multiple planets, with very intricate sort of, like, say a copper mine might spawn with 3,000 tons of copper that you can potentially mine up. And then, you got all your various other things. Like, it'd be simulating a lot. The thing is, I think you could make it very, if you were to program it, I sort of have in my mind ways you could do it to make it simple. So, like, say it would say simulate your entire production line, and then figure out, say, how much you make per X amount. Like, so say if you mine, say, 10 tons a sort of tick in the game, that you might produce, 8 tons of copper, like, processed, or something like that. You're mining this much, how much are you producing? Um, and then like obviously like, it would be sort of hard. Like you have to come up with some sort of way to simulate very ridiculous designs. But I think once you figure out, like if I could figure out a system to do that, then you just use that, and then if it ever changes something in that system, you then re-simulate it, and then I think that'd be pretty simple because then it just becomes like a bunch of numbers just ticking up, because yeah, you just have a lot of numbers that tick up. I think the other thing is like if those kind of games, whilst they are better single player, like in terms of they're easier to play because you can stop at any point and start it again, they're also really fun to play multiplayer. And like I don't think I could ever attempt a multiplayer game, but that's the kind of game I'd love to design. I don't know how I got here to this topic, but it would be such a cool system, like to have this sort of sprawling empire, and you can micromanage literally any level of detail in your empire. You can sort of construct factories. You can then determine how your factory districts laid out, kind of like in a city management game. And then you can go even further and you can construct, you could design military bases, like, and depend on how you design them, could change how your troops come out. If you design it really poorly, you might not get very good soldiers out of it, like, because their training course is like a walk in the park, quite literally. They're not going to get trained from that. Whereas if it's a good, course or place to train soldiers at, it will work. And like, airstrips, like how many planes can actually fit in a hangar based on the design you used. And the cool thing about it is there's no set size, right? So you can make a really big airfield. Obviously it might become very vital to like your military or something. But then, if you don't have enough space, you can make a relatively small one that can maybe house a couple of fighter jets or something, but not host like commercial planes. And it's like, all those sort of like tiny decisions you could make in such a cool little game. Yeah, I say little, it'd be a massive game. It would be one of the most ridiculous, overly complicated games. But I think I'd love it. It would be such a strange thing. Like you could sort of see the systems building up. It's just a matter of how well would it run, really? Because graphics wise, I don't think that's the problem. It's easy to figure out, like once you figure out a system to sort of render them, then you can zoom out and the rendering gets much smaller or whatever. That shouldn't be too hard, but it's the simulating an entire world. That's what's hard. Like, and the different aspects to it, like how do you manage certain things, like a real-time strategy as a world? Do you have micromanagement control of your units, or is it like battalion-based, like Hearts of Iron sort of? But there's so many options, like in terms of all the sort of questions you could ask about designing such a crazy game. But I imagine like that'd be one of those games that it would put a lot of people off because of its technicalities, but at the same time it would really like, I think there'd be a lot of people who love a kind of game like that, and the thing is, because it's so, in a way, I'd hope it'd be very customizable in a way, like there wouldn't necessarily be some simple, do this strategy. Obviously people will figure out optimized options for how the system works. Someone will figure out, if you've got a copper mine, set up your sort of factory to produce copper like this, and you'll get it right. Like, they'll figure that out, and they'll figure out how to, optimal distances and things like that. But I feel like it would actually create a sort of environment where people don't necessarily have one run-of-the-mill strategy that just works. But at the same time, I think it would be one of those games that is extremely satisfying when you try something really weird and it just works. Like, the only problem is there's so many complications. Like if you know, and like balancing a game like that to make it so that, especially if you did have multiplayer, like it would be one of the sort of craziest challenges. But it'd be fun, I think, and being able to muck around with all the things. I mean, could you imagine if you, in a sort of a Hearts of Iron way, like you could start off as a country, you know, in the modern day, or you could start off as a, you could make the world like a post-apocalyptic or something, and you know, small factions where basically there's nothing. You know, it starts as like with ruins everywhere kind of deal, burnt out forests and stuff. Like that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. And then maybe, you know, depending on how the game's designed, you could potentially have all sorts of weird things. Like I've always wanted when I play like an RTS to sort of be able to join the battle. Like, you know, I like FPS games because they're usually just mindless. You just shoot around and you